Let's talk about creating a space for difficult, complicated, important conversations. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk About. I am joined, as you can see, by my colleague Joanne Clinton and also by our friend Juan Carlos Ferrufino, who has been an Arlingtonian for 40 years but was not born there. He was born in Bolivia instead. And we are here to talk, the three of us, today. Well, let me just remind you that Let's Talk About is about creating a safe space for us to have tough conversations and for our listeners to hopefully take something, relate to something from what we are saying, and take plenty from our conversation. But really, it's just about kind of sharing our experiences and our views, etc., in a very free-form way. So welcome to the conversation. I did want to say about Juan Carlos, he was born in Bolivia. He has been here a very long time, but I would like to speak today, the three of us, about a couple of major topics which will allow us to kind of wander through a lot of different elements of our experience. Those topics will be, excuse me, otherness and our respective kind of experiences with that, and expectations. Expectations is a kind of neutral word, but you'll see how that gets fleshed out as we talk about it. So first of all, guys, both of you, thank you very much. I'm so glad that we are able to have this conversation. Juan Carlos, I'm going to start the conversation just by asking you. I mentioned that you've been here for 40 years. Mm-hmm. How do you identify these days? If somebody meets you for the first time, how are you wanting to present yourself?
Interesting. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I think myself as a Bolivian American. I realized that after so many years in the country, I'm more American than I'm Bolivian. Although I dearly care about my culture, and as you know, I play Bolivian instruments and everything. But I realized going back home recently that sincerely, this feels more like home than there. I love it there. Food, culture, the music, everything. But when I think of home, I think of Arlington as my house or my home. So I would say I'm a Bolivian American, more on the American
Emphasis
side.
on the American,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because you've been here 2/3 of your life, pretty much.
Yes.
At this point.
I've been asked this before, and asking me sometimes, well, which one you love most? You know, are you an American? Are you a Bolivian? And my response now is like, it's like you asking me to who I love more, my mom or my dad.
Right, or which
I
of your
love them the
kids or
same,
whatever.
two different loves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how I define myself these days.
Yeah. So, and that leaves you in a space a certain amount of the time, I would think,
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, that's kind of in between, an in-between space, because you've moved between communities. You were at some point an immigrant. You are no longer, because
Mm-hmm.
this has been your home for a really long
Yeah.
time. But nonetheless, I think you're going to be able to speak to some parts of the immigrant experience.
Yeah.
Joanne, you've been on this. You know, we've been hosting this together, and you were the featured guest. I would say the first couple of episodes, also talking about that moving between worlds, all within this country and its culture, but pretty different worlds at the same time, right?
Yes.
And expectations that come from that.
Expectations of, at one point in my life, as a practicing Muslim, I did wear hijab, and just by wearing a simple scarf over my head and having a certain complexion, people automatically assume that I don't speak English or that I'm not from this country, or what have you, or being a person of a particular shade, you can float through different multicultural spaces and just assume a space. But then at the same time, when when I start to talk or relate to people, especially on like with music or um, recreational things like movies and music, things that I enjoy. It's a very broad spectrum of the things that I enjoy doing. And also, my background growing up in a diverse neighborhood in Worcester, and being highly articulate as an African American woman, I sound, or people perceive me of being someone who's trying to be something I'm not, trying to be white, a wannabe. When I'm just me. It's a culmination of my life experiences, of the way I speak, the way I dress, the things I enjoy eating, the music I enjoy listening to is just a culmination of my experience of being living here in America. But expectations are thrown upon me because of, quote unquote, I'm African American. Yes.
And I'm wondering, when Carlos, like you were saying that you relate more, like you identify more now with the American part of you.
Hmm.
How does that play in Bolivia with others? In other words, how are they seeing you? How are they treating you?
Yeah. So when I got to Bolivia, I become a Bolivian. I can blend in. I don't go with the, you know, I'm in America. I have, different resources that you have. I'm one more of the crowd. Nobody knows unless they ask that I'm coming from Bolivia. So I don't have a different experience because of it. Um, I just see two different worlds. The limitations there are greater, but there's also happier people for some reason. So there's really no effect because when I go there, I am a Bolivian, and
Yeah, but I think that that's probably true, or clearly true, uh, kind of in a macro sense. But I'm wondering, like the people who know you well,
mhm,
the people who either were there when you left and have stayed,
that
uh, or are in some way aware of the fact that you are no longer part of that community in the same way as
mhm.
they are. And of course, you
Yeah.
could pass, so to
Well,
speak.
John was mentioning expectations. I think they expected me to be, um, special and to request the special things, and I'm totally not that. When I go home, I eat in the streets. I love street food. I jump on the colectivos, which are the buses. So there is an expectation that I should be more demanding. They're asking for more, privilege because I come from the States. But I know better. Like I just don't fit into that expectation. And so after a week or two, people just relax and they see me as another one of the group.
So they expect you to be someone who, like, I've come to visit. I am of a privilege. You must cater to me.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're like, no, I'm home to visit. I'm here to be with
Yeah.
my people.
Yeah. Precisely because I've been around the subject of diversity for a long time. I know better. I know when I go there, I'm not, showing that I have dollars and that I have means. I don't dress differently like everybody else. I dress like everybody else there. But to your point, Joan, it is an expectation that because I'm coming from the United States, everything should be catered to me, especially things should be better, cleaner places, and just I don't.
Yeah, but I'd like
Mhm.
to dig into that a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit more because what I'm wondering is where is the line between what Bolivians think about America
yeah.
generally,
Hmm.
um, and what they think that you should, how they think that you should be. So in other
Yeah,
words,
yeah. I just remember my brother. Um, well, remember, I was undocumented for about 30 years.
30
So
years.
that was the time that I did not go back to Bolivia. So I went back in the past 5 years. only. And so my brother, whom I haven't seen on all the time, prized me on how good my Spanish was. And I'm like, brother, I speak Spanish. He said, but you haven't lost your Spanish. So I think, again, to the expectations, they thought that I would be more Americanized, that my, Spanish would be, not as good. But I check on myself. Like, I don't want to be that. I think if there is one thing I'm fairly proud of is I think myself as a bicultural and bilingual. And bicultural means that I preserve what I was in a genuine way in both cultures, and I try to do that as much as I can.
That's really, to me, that seems like like the healthiest possible way to deal with a situation like we're talking about, where you are part of two different worlds,
Yeah.
And judged in each of those worlds in different ways.
Yeah, and John was saying before, in terms of privileges, I do feel privileged that I can navigate an Anglo-Saxon world, an African-American world, a Latino world, and I coexist with everyone, and I don't feel out of the group. That to me is a privilege, because I feel that my world is just so much wider than other people.
I don't know, man. I think people would be interested in knowing whatever Juan Carlos's secret sauce is for how you deal with a situation which for so many people has them feeling not like unmoored, like not part of two places, but instead stuck in between and not part of either one. Which is so typical for.
I think we discussed this before, and I share with you too my sense of burning. I was burned at some point, talking about diversity. I had it. Everything was diversity. And, my kids went to Belmont Hill and Belmont Day, and there I work on issues of diversity. I was the founder of the Parents for Diversity at Belmont Hill. And I took it too seriously. Everything to me had to be related to, and at some point, it's just too much. Because at the end of the day, we all just humans. We have our shades and everything, but at the end of the day, we just humans. And so I think my secret sauce is that I don't give greater importance to that, but to the person. Some years ago, I was working in the Lowell area, and there was a position with the Vietnamese community for the director of a small business office. And the search started, and the ideal candidate had to be Vietnamese because of the population. Along came this gentleman, Ross Smith, the whitest guy you could ever see. And Ross didn't speak Vietnamese, didn't know much about the culture, but he was a brilliant businessman. And what he taught us was, you don't necessarily have to be from the race as long as you respect it. And Ross totally respected the culture, the language. He was such an asset. But we could have made a mistake. We could have said, unless it's a Vietnamese, we're not hiring him.
Right.
And so I think we got to kind of explore that and see people more as humans than as people of color.
Which is what I totally hear you saying.
Yes.
Like that basically your own experience is one where you're just like, just treat me like a human being. Just another human being that you're meeting, and you need to get to know. Just ask the questions that you need to get to know somebody. Is that?
Yes, I agree. Juan Carlos' experience seems to be very professional and liberating, and mine, it came through a much more toxic route. But I came to the same conclusion that it doesn't matter what I sound like, what I dress like, or where I live. I'm still a woman of color, and all these expectations of looking like, sounding like, acting like, or being a part of a particular group is the root of my identity. My identity is just who I am. And also, when I first moved out here, I still had like this, my defenses were up because always
By out here, do you mean to Arlington?
Arlington, yes, moved to Arlington, yes, to Arlington. My defenses was up because that was the environment that I was in. I was always on the defense, looking for the discrimination, looking for, the predator, and because I had my defenses was up, I wasn't seeing people for who they were. Like I was saying before we started rolling, is that I had an experience a couple of times when I was waiting for the bus or at the Whole Foods, and people just started having a conversation with me, and I kind of like looked at them like, why are they talking to me?
Forgive me. I love that you said that. I think that if we look for discrimination, we'll find it.
Yeah.
Because we're looking so hard.
Yes.
That anything may be like it, and it will be.
Yeah, always on the defense. I'm looking, why is this white person talking to me? Because it is not a white person. It is just a nice, polite lady who is speaking to you because it's a nice day, and she's asking you a few questions about your selection of what you're eating or feedback on what am I going to do for the day. Trying to be friendly.
Yep.
I have neighbors.
Or
this is possibly a future friend.
Yeah.
This is not some. Excuse me. This is not some quote unquote white person looking to attack me. I had to let go of that. These people are just people, and I want people to treat me like a person. So I need to see the other person as just a person and lower the defenses and see the humanness in the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was going to say that sometimes you could they could be discriminating you, but because you're not using that lens, slips through because. People are going to make the attempts to discriminate you. And if you are with your antennas out, you're going to go, oh, okay, so now let's go, 1-to-1. But if you don't have your antenna on, you're going to let people just with their crap on their mouth and nothing is going to happen and you move on with your life. Or you could focus on it and really be confrontational all the time.
Yeah.
Well, how do you both do? How would you rate yourselves, in a sense, in terms of how you do when you're on the other end of the equation that you're talking about? So in other words, are you very, very good, both of you, at not having the expectations, all the things that you've just been describing, you don't want to have imposed on you? Are you really good about not doing that with anybody else?
Okay, time for an exam. Okay, you used to teach, right? So it's time for the exam. I would say my awareness is higher. I would say that when I step into any given situation, I do have that reflex, to put the shields up for the defense. Then I tell myself, bring it down. You have no idea what's going on. When it's time, to defend yourself, you defend yourself. If there's no need to defend yourself, just stop it. Just listen, learn, and be receptive. And in doing that, I've learned a lot working here, Arlington Community Media, and being receptive to being a part of this segment, and also working behind the scenes, like in the control room, and working with interns, multicultural, multi-generational, and multi-situational. That has helped me to becoming what I expect myself to be, is just me, and it's allowing me to see other people as just Juan Carlos, as just James, not James,
the white guy,
the
guy who, if he's Latin, he sure don't look it.
Right,
he sure doesn't sound it.
Or Juan Carlos, the Bolivian, and I did not know that you were undocumented, but there's no reason to cast judgment about that. But there are people out there who will. Yeah. But also, and just to sit here and have this conversation, this three-way conversation, it's a step towards, building myself up to the place where I can just see the other person as just a human being like me, not where they're from, who they are, what color they are, and what kind of identity they have in their pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you one big lesson that my mom taught me. And she told me, if you walk in the street and the dog barks you, if you bark back, who's the craziest one? The dog or you? The dog is doing what the dogs do. They bark, and some people are ignorant, and they will call you names and they barking. You turn around and you start barking back, you becoming more ignorant than them. So I was going once to my office in Dorchester. I was dressed up, my suit and tie. I was in my car, and in the curb, I did something, I don't know what. A person was talking to me and rolled on my window and said, "Excuse me," and she said, "Go back where you came from." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute." And then I remember my mom. I was like, "Okay, she's barking," and I moved on. I could have let it hit me hard and just. I learned not to give much importance to that because it's their ignorance, it's their loss, it's not mine.
Well, can I tell you something that's probably somewhat revealing about what we all do, which is I had to stop myself just now as you were telling that story. That woman, you put down the window, she says what she says. The first thing that came into my mind, and this is a confession, was she black? Was she white? Who was that person who was doing that?
It was white.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. What we're talking about, right, is specifically that. And then I had to, because of the conversation, I stopped myself in my head and went, wait a minute, that just doesn't matter.
Right.
Because it could be a person of any color, any background, et cetera, who would say something like that.
Yep. I'll tell you one more story. When I used to clean offices as my first job because I didn't speak English. And my first office work was with the New England Research Institute in Watertown. And at the time I was a surveyor. So we were doing a survey about tobacco consumption in Dorchester. And I lived in Arlington, I work in Watertown. And that was kind of what I thought of Boston. And then suddenly they take me to Dorchester. So they put me on a corner where I was going to interview people about their tobacco and alcohol consumption. And I remember being froze there because I have never seen so many black people. The bus driver, the police officer, the people in the bank. And I'm afraid. And I don't know why. Now, years later, I really thought about this. I said, why was I so afraid of people I did not know? And all I remember was watching American movies where there was no black person or Latino person that were good people. We were all bad people. And that's my only
And you had actually taken that in.
So that's my
time.
only explanation as to why that day, with people I did not know, I was fearful of them. In my mind, is the only explanation is that I was brainwashed into thinking that these communities are not good communities because white people were Superman. They were always there. So I think we have to also review ourselves and think, what's my background and what kind of load am I bringing forward to judge people?
You talked a little bit earlier and made reference to the fact that we had talked about this some weeks back, the three of us, about you getting burnt out on the whole diversity. Carrying that, just carrying that as some kind of, you're charged with being vigilant at all times about that kind of thing, and that what you've learned is to let it go. I want to ask you that from that lens, or from that context, and that knowing that came to you over time, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a hot button topic now, right? What do you think about the attacks, the virtues of DEI programs? What do you think about that?
I think DEI has been taken to the extreme. I think people are extremely sensitive now. Whereas if I say hello to Juan and she has this lens of diversity, she's gonna think, is he approaching me? Why is he approaching me? It was just a hello. But we have put a lens that is extremely sensitive, I think. I think of our children these days, and I'm thinking like, these are our future, and these kids are so sensitive to everything. I don't know how they're going to govern us. So in my mind, DEI has gone to the extreme. And I say this as an immigrant who probably was discriminated, probably,
right, you suffered. We can assume that you suffered some of the treatment that DEI is meant to counter.
But we all know that life is tough. Isn't it true that if you are a person that constantly washes her hands and is not exposed to germs, you are put on the real world, you probably are going to suffer a lot because you've been put in a
you're
bubble.
Vulnerable, right? You've not been able to build up any
I feel that we have to
resistance.
live in reality, and just I think DEI could be a good thing as long as it doesn't go to the extreme where you are forcing me to think what you think. I respect what you think, but you also have to respect what I think. So it has to be a two-way street.
Do you have? I'm
I
wondering
agree.
if you have any thoughts.
I agree. I agree very much so. Where the whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was starting to hear a lot of that sounding like expectations of what diversity is, the expectation of what equity is, and what inclusion is, and almost to the point was like it was like the culture police, and sometimes it was being a little bit overboard. There's not enough diversity in this group. Well, this is the group that you have, and these are the people who are here. So can we just enjoy what we're doing? Do we have to we have to have a particular number of people from this group, a particular number of people from that group, and a particular number of people who identify as this gender in order for us to have a group to engage into some cultural event? Or can we just let the group be what it is and provide the standard of DEI to that group, as opposed to forcing the group to conform to the DEI expectation? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know what the audience listening in on this is going to think, but I think it's instructive that two people, visibly people of color who would be identified that way within our culture, have this to say about DEI programs, because I think the reflexive response of white, and again, I'm going to identify myself as white liberals like myself, is no, DEI is good for you. But DEI practice to the extreme, like you said, to an extreme, is like anything else.
Yeah.
It's not good for people if it's way out there.
I have a very good friend of mine who is as white as he can be, and he has a club, a group of white people who are analyzing how they have damaged this society. And I'm like, stop. You can do whatever with your life, but don't pity me. I can defend myself. I can do this too, but don't gather around thinking, how are we going to help poor Juan Carlos? That doesn't do me any good.
You know what? I can't believe it, but half an hour.
Right.
Boom. I guess I can believe it, right? Because once we get to talking, it's going to go fast.
Yep.
I think what we're going to say is we are going to say goodbye for now.
Yeah.
But we're going to just come back here and do the sequel, so to speak. We're going to do a next episode of this, because there is much still to unpack here.
Love it.
I agree.
So I really appreciate both of you being here. Juan Carlos Ferrufino, as I said, a longtime Arlington resident, and Joanne Clinton, my dear colleague, and I'm James Milan. This is Let's Talk About. So glad that you could join us, and do look for the sequel of our conversation. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.